some of us are narrow-minded thinkers and some of us are very large creative thinkers, but we are all creative thinkers.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter, and today Joe's interviewing Firdaus Kharas. How does the modern equivalent of Dr. Seuss? Firdaus is a master global communicator and humanitarian who has influenced hundreds of millions of people's lives for the better. Desmond Tutu called his creative work, which has been viewed by more than 1 billion people worldwide, outstanding and powerful. A Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, he was named one of the world's 50 most talented social innovators and has received more than 112 awards, including the prestigious Peabody Award. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Firdaus Kharas of Chocolate Mousse Media. Welcome, Firdaus. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here.
So start by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and crucially, where you do it.
Well, where I do it is all around the world, quite literally. My work has been used in 198 countries. It's been seen by over 1 billion people. And essentially what I do is use media to better the human condition. So I've been working on COVID-19, and before that I did a video on how to interact with the police in the United States. And I worked on a lot of disease prevention, on human rights and other issues like that. I use creativity to better the human condition through mass communications called behavior change communications. And I've been doing that for the last 25 years. I'm based out of Canada. I was based out of Switzerland as well.
Wow, it feels like it's a big topic and we've not even started. So my first question is usually, and I am very sort of pertinent here, sort of how did that all happen? Because it's not the sort of thing you probably, left college saying that you wanted to do, or left school saying what you wanted to do. How did it all come about?
Oh, I blame Mother Teresa. When I was quite small, about 8 years old, I met Mother Teresa several times because my mother was the head of a national NGO in India where I was born and grew up, in Calcutta. And Mother Teresa was not famous at that point. This was in the early 60s. And I remember the image of Mother Teresa working in a huge room with the poorest of the poor, dying on cots as if it were just yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I realized, looking back, that I think I got my first taste of working outside of one's comfort zone for the benefit of others. At that time, you can imagine that an 8-year-old walking into a room of very sick and dying people has a lasting impression.
Yeah.
And so I can draw a straight line from my early socialization in India to all my university schooling and through my other earlier work in national affairs, particularly in the Government of Canada on refugee affairs. And I headed the United Nations Association Canada for a while. So I use media, but I make media with a difference. I don't do commercial programs. I do media that essentially uses my background in international issues. And I use media to better the human condition by making people change their behavior, either directly by the viewer watching what I'm producing, or indirectly by creating a conversation about a particular topic like sexual violence that I want to create a topic on, and therefore create an influence on the person whose behavior I need to change.
Mm-hmm. And how
did you know that that was the way to do that? So you knew very clearly that it was about helping other people, but obviously there were so many routes that you could have chosen. How did you know that it was the education and the creativity piece?
I actually started with UNICEF. We some time ago in the 1990s, we did what was then a very new convention, which is called the Convention on the Rights of Children. We took every right in it and we animated it, using studios around the world. And in those days, we had to send broadcast quality tapes to broadcasters. And over 2,200 broadcasters played them around the world. They became the most watched media on human rights ever created. And then I thought that this is a good way of mass communications to get people to focus on a particular subject and to change their behavior. And the work that I'm probably most famous for creating or co-creating is called the Three Amigos, which was 3 funny animated condoms to stop the spread of HIV/AIDS. And that became very famous and was used in over 150 countries in one way or the other during the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis. And I think I've used the approach of using humor because I don't believe in bashing people over the head. I mean, if you think of most behavior change communications, they don't use much creativity. They simply, they might show you, for example, an image of a battered woman if they're dealing with domestic violence and say, basically, don't do this. Well, I don't think that does anything except publicize domestic violence. I don't think it addresses the person whose behavior you want to change in that example, and that is the person who is doing the abuse, not the victim. And so I think that I use humor to bring a person to the serious point I want to make at the end of the spot, because I think that the person has to internalize the message, and we have to use a lot of creativity in reaching people. So I always say that I have an audience of one person, just one. I don't group people together, and we can get into that if you want, just why. But I essentially just have an audience of one person, each individual person whose behavior needs to change.
I think that would be a really good thing to explore on the basis that many people in business, people, coaches and consultants that I work with, don't understand the importance of sort of niching what they do and finding that one person to speak to in terms of their marketing. And in fact, I only had that very debate this week in a networking group that I run where somebody was trying to say, I can sell to all of these different people. And I was trying to say, you've got to pick one person. And in this case, it was one group of people, not even just one person. And that was a struggle. So talk a bit about how important it is to speak to that one person.
It's extremely important. In business, people misunderstand what creativity is. So let me start with what creativity is in my definition. Creativity is the ability to think differently by a mental process of original thoughts that leads to the creation of new ideas. So in my book, for example, I go into what creativity is not. And the first thing I say is creativity is not a product. You can't actually see creativity. You can see the result of creativity in a product, but it's not a product, it's a mental process. And the second thing is creativity is not innovation. A lot of people, I think, coaches and so on, misunderstand what innovation is. They put, 5 people from a company into a room for a couple of days and say, okay, now we're going to brainstorm and we're going to come up with new ideas. It hardly ever works. It might work, but it'll be an accident if it does work. That is not the best way to get creativity out of people. Innovation is also like a product, is the result of applying creative thinking, of coming up with new ideas, and then you can use it in a group. I don't mean to suggest that groups have nothing to do with creativity, but individuals are creative people, groups are not. You can take an idea and you can enhance it, you can decide how to implement it, you can create the product and so on in a group. So you can take a creative idea and then come up with something that is a group that comes best out of a group. But the original creative thought is never a group process. It's an individual thought process.
Mm.
If you think about the most creative person in the world in history, who would you think of? To me, it's Leonardo da Vinci. He was a creative genius. Now, he came up, for example, with the idea of a modern helicopter some 500 years ago. So if you think of Leonardo da Vinci, imagine if he had put his ideas through a group process. I mean, we wouldn't know his name today, and we probably wouldn't know his ideas today, because everybody in that group would have laughed at him. Yet he was an absolute creative genius and moved the world forward. And I think that is a good example of how creative thinking is an individual process, and that groups actually can be detrimental to the group process. And the best known proponent of that was Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs often said that it is really hard to design products by focus groups. A lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them.
Yes.
And I think that's absolutely true.
Yes, that was following the Henry Ford thing, wasn't it? About people would have invented faster horses, not the car, or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what Henry Ford said. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Yes.
You can't. If you're a creative thinker and in business, you have to not just think outside the box, but really far outside the box. And I think that's an important point that many business leaders fail to understand. And they do so at their great detriment, especially now in the era of COVID in 2020. I think if there's one silver lining that's come out of this year, it's the fact that we've all had to rethink everything. I mean, if you think of it from a company's perspective, they've had to look at the supply lines. They've had to think about how they create their products. They've had to rethink about how they reach their existing customers. They've had to rethink about how they reach new customers. So everything has had to be rethought. I mean, everything from where we work from to how we move products, how we get products to our customers, and so on. Everything has had to be rethought. We've had to apply a lot of creative thinking. And if you don't apply creative thinking, for example, if you don't have an online presence as a company and you've been waiting for people to walk into your store, for example, you're going to go out of business. It may take longer, it may take sooner, it may already have happened this year. But if you have not thought creatively, you will simply go out of business.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So thinking back to the where we were talking to one person, how does that connect up?
Well, that connects up because in the age of the internet, we are all individuals. Big data is created on our individual preferences and choices. So, in the old days, a marketer might have said, okay, I'm an urban, educated Canadian, and so on, and given me a certain product because he thinks that he can group me in those kinds of characteristics. It's not true anymore. Nobody really should be marketing because I'm a group of a certain age or a certain ethnicity or a certain nationality or urban or affluent or whatever. I think that every time we go on the internet nowadays, we're tracked. Everything we look at, every product we buy, and an individual profile is being created of us. And I do think that is the right way to do it. I've been advocating that we're all individuals for the last many, many years, many more years than the internet has been in existence.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that I think that if you think about my work, which has to go around the world, it has to have so much creativity that they have to get around the various barriers that all of us carry around in ourselves to effective communications. And I will give you some examples: our belief system, our culture, our education, our ethnicity, our intolerances, the language we speak, our morals, our stereotypes in our heads, racism in our heads, and our values. So we're all different. We're all individuals. No two people are so aligned to each other's thinking that we can put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. You know that there's a saying that you don't understand me until you walked a mile in my shoes,
Yes.
or whatever that saying is. I think that's just complete nonsense. Nobody else can walk in anybody else's shoes because we're all individuals. And I do think that has profound implications for companies, particularly for marketing, because if you think of us as one particular person, we all carry around such a myriad of factors in our brains and our personalities that we see the world in a totally different way. So, for example, I'm not a particularly religious person, but other people might be very religious. So the way they see something will be affected by that. Mm-hmm. Some people might have a bias against women, for example. I hope I don't have one. But, somebody who has a bias against women, then when a professional woman in a context, a business context, is talking to that person will be influenced, even if it's subconsciously, will be influenced by that factor, because that factor has importance in their brain. Mm. And so because we have all these factors, I have a list of over 50 of them, that we all carry around in ourselves. No two people are alike, because the importance that any particular factor has in our brains is different than everybody else's. So the possible combination with like 50 factors, it runs into trillions and trillions. So there's no way that somebody else thinks exactly like I or exactly like you.
No, exactly. It's funny. I've been doing some video podcasts and conversations with a colleague about employee engagement, a couple of colleagues over the whole of lockdown, and there's a bit of a joke that my constant mantra is the bit about treating people as individuals. And when my daughter was young, her school head teacher used to sort of bang on about the fact that you should treat people as you would like to be treated yourself. And I always used to tell Ellie that was wrong, and she used to get annoyed with me because to her, the head teacher was God. But I always used to say, well, it's not about how you want to be treated. Going back to your thing about walking in somebody else's shoes, it is actually how they want to be treated, not how you think they want to or how you want to. It's got to be about that person. But how do we get to know what those people want, when it's not us and we can't tell? And as you say, everyone is so different.
Well, I think that we ultimately come back to the fact that we're one human family. That COVID has taught us, has reminded us of that. And, I can't think of another example. I mean, you would have to go all the way back, perhaps to World War II, to think when, what happens somewhere in a faraway place impacts us, no matter who we are or where we are. And that is simply because we're all living together on this one fragile planet. Mm. And I think that we have come back to this notion, we have to come back to this notion on big issues and on small issues, that there are issues that no matter, and pandemics are a good example, that no matter where we are affected by them. There literally isn't a person on this planet that hasn't been affected by COVID-19 in 2020, no matter where you live, no matter what language you speak, no matter what religion you are, and so on. Mm-hmm. So I think that idea, that notion that there are some things that affect us as a human species is a very critical and important one. So when you create a global company and you keep thinking about the global companies that are the biggest in the world, well, the biggest company in the world that I'm aware of right now by market capital is Apple. And Apple is probably one of the most creative companies in the world as well, if not the most creative company. I have a great deal of respect for Apple. And it started by two people in the garage. That's all. And they kept applying their creativity. And, if you think of Apple as an example, the first company that had the idea of creating a mobile phone wasn't Apple. It was a company called Motorola.
Yeah.
And Motorola is obviously nowhere in the mobile phone business. And that's because they had the original creative idea, but then they didn't keep applying their creative thinking. And so then Apple and Samsung and Nokia and so on all came along and took market away from the company that came up with the original idea.
Yeah.
So applying creative thinking in a business is not a one-off thing. You have to do it continuously. It's a continuous process. And I go in my book through the various things that you need, the kind of 8 aspects of applying creativity that you need, that you need in a business to succeed. Mm-hmm. And I can go through those if you wish, but you need certain things in order to be able to apply creative thinking.
I think it'd be interesting to hear what they are in sort of through the lens, if you like, of the pandemic, because one of the things that's been frustrating me around the narrative around sort of moving forwards as a world is that there seems to be so much talk about getting back to how things were, and things like even when the UK came out of lockdown, the first thing the government did was tell everyone to sort of go back to the office, as if that was the only way to run a business. And, some people did because that's what they think is the only way to run a business. And others, there's a friend of mine who works for a big company with like 55,000 employees, and they're still working from home, and they have all the way through, and they're still doing really well, and they've made it, work. They've got a new way of working now. But how do we encourage creativity in how we move forwards, rather than sort of end up trying to snap back into what we're used to and keep things sort of as normal as possible because it's such an upheaval? How do we encourage those changes and encourage people to take the opportunity of the trauma that we're going through, if you like, to come out differently at the end of it?
The first thing I would say is that we all have to accept that we are creative thinkers. The ability of us to apply creative thinking is different. And some of us are narrow-minded thinkers, and some of us are very large creative thinkers, but we are all creative thinkers. And people sometimes quite often tell me, well, I'm not a painter, or I'm not an artist, or I'm not a writer, so I'm not a creative person. And that's completely nonsense. Every single person, no matter who you are a creative thinker. And if you don't think you are, just think back to your childhood. And if you are in an adulthood now, and you say, okay, maybe I was a creative thinker when I was a child because, I sang and danced and so on, but now I don't do that. Well, just take a piece of paper and take a pen or a pencil, and draw a squiggly line. Just take a piece of paper and draw a squiggly line in any way you want. Just not a straight line, a squiggly line. No matter what squiggly line you come up with, that is your creative thinking. Because no other person, because the number of pixels, for example, on a paper, no other person has probably ever drawn that squiggly line exactly the way that you just drew it. Mm-hmm. It is your individualism that is coming out in the way that you draw a squiggly line. Now, that's just a simple example of how we are all individuals and how we're all creative thinkers, because nobody will tell you, well, I can't draw a squiggly line. Mm-hmm. You can, and that's an expression of your creative thinking.
Yes, yeah.
So I do think that the first thing we need to do is understand that we're all creative thinking, except that we're all creative thinkers. That creative thinking is not the same as artistry. It's quite different. And creative thinking is what we need in both our personal lives and our professional lives. There's an annual survey done of the in the largest platform of the world of employers and employees. And they ask the employers, what is the one characteristic, the top characteristic that you're looking for in a potential employee? And for the last 5 years, it has been creativity. For the last 5 years, even before COVID, it has been creativity, and I have absolutely no doubt it's going to be creativity going forward in the post-COVID period. So the first thing is we are creative thinkers, accept that. The second thing is the status quo is never static. Nothing stays the same. And, we talked about Apple and Motorola as an example, but there are many, many other examples. No company absolutely needs to have all its employees go back into an office. None. It doesn't matter what they do. If, for example, they are companies that are actually creating widgets and they need people in their plant, for example, and you're going to tell me, well, this is a plant. Well, let me tell you that if you're doing something that's repetitive in a plant, AI and automation, robots are going to take over your job pretty soon. Yeah. So if they haven't already. So don't think that just because you're creating something in a plant, that's the only way to do it. And every other aspect of professional life, goods and services that we can think of. I can't think of any other place that needs to have people in an office. I haven't been to an office meeting. Perhaps one or two, but I haven't been to an office meeting since March in Canada. And, I haven't lost anything because I've been doing all my work online for years anyway. And it hasn't changed anything. And I think that every company can do that. Why can't a bank have its advisors on investment sitting at home, professionally dressed and whatever, but still sitting at home and advising their clients? Why can't a manufacturing company CEO direct his employees by sitting at home and meeting with them on one of the platforms like Zoom and Skype and so on to manage their employees? Yeah, I don't think anybody needs to go in. There's some employees that obviously you can't do with not going in. So, for example, a bus driver is a good example. Well, a bus driver just simply can't function if he doesn't go and drive the bus. So, there are some things that are going to be a necessity going in. But for the vast majority of employees, I think that's not going to be necessary in the future.
No. Yeah, and it's interesting because companies aren't all doing the same thing. So there are companies where you would think, it might be quite difficult for them to work from home, but they're making it work. And others are just saying it's too hard when it's easier for them than, company A sort of thing. So it's interesting. I accept that the economy in city centres is affected if people aren't in the offices. But other than that, to me, it just feels like the economy will go out to the sort of towns and the villages and the back a bit like the 19th century 18th century or whatever, all the sort of local artisan type situations, because people will be working from home and shopping from home in a different way, I guess.
They will be. They'll be on an individual basis. And so I'm not sure I agree with the analogy of going back to the kind of 18th century artisan.
You want modern as well.
Yeah, because I think that people will be online more than anything else. And,
yes.
and there's no better example than Amazon and its share price over 2020. It's obviously gone up considerably. And Zoom and all these other platforms that have been affected by COVID-19.
Yeah.
That trend is going to continue and accelerate. There is absolutely no end in sight, I think, for a company that produces and sells online, and then the shipping and everything that's involved. That trend is going to continue and accelerate in the next few years. I think that one of the things that COVID-19 in 2020 has done is that it has forced companies to greatly accelerate their online presence. So a company might have had a plan, okay, we'll have some kind of website and get online and so on in the next 3-5 years, whatever, and they've had to do it in 2020. They didn't have a choice. I also think that retail, for example, I think that tourism, for example, these are huge industries that are going to change forever. If any CEO of a retail organization or any CEO of a airline or a tourism-related organization thinks that things are just going to go back to normal, they're completely mistaken.
Yes.
Things will not go back to normal. I think that demand is going to be changing considerably. I think, for example, that, it's going to take several years. Now, even if we have a vaccine tomorrow, which, by the way, I'm not very hopeful on. I've been working on HIV/AIDS, for example, for 30 years, and we don't have a vaccine for HIV yet, which is also a virus. We have antiretroviral drugs that keep you alive, but that doesn't prevent you from getting HIV in the first place. No. So I do think that this is, yes, there are companies that will succeed. By the way, that's a good example of what else I say in my book, which is that creative thinkers have to embrace failure. If you don't embrace failure, you can't be a highly creative thinker. And to give you an example of the vaccine, there are over 100 companies, I think, in various stages of trying to come up with a vaccine. Well, 98% of them are not going to succeed. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be doing it. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be trying it. They should certainly be trying it, but they know that the odds, the mathematical odds against them. So I say in my book that the best and most knowledgeable people of failure are people like sportsmen and research scientists. Research scientists know that they are going to fail more often than they're going to succeed. They know that right from the start. Mathematically, that is absolutely the case. It doesn't mean that you don't try it, but it means that you, as a creative thinker, you accept that you're going to fail and you get up and get going when you do fail.
Yes.
And it's the same with sportsmen. If you think of that, you're in the UK. Well, if you think of a cricket player, for example, when a cricket player goes to bat, he knows that the chances of him batting a century in a test match is probably less, much less, than not getting to that figure of 100 if that's his goal. Yeah. So I mean, in baseball, for example, if you hit the ball 1 out of 4 times, you're doing really well. So there are professionals and there are people who accept failure, who know that they're going to more likely fail than succeed. And I think we have to all become much more adept at accepting failure.
So taking this sort of very micro in terms of yourself and how you run your business and how you work, how do you use your creativity to ensure that you're successful and you get done what you need to get done?
Well, what I do is very, very difficult. There are not many people doing that. Because, when I tell people, well, my work has been seen in 198 countries and reached well over 1 billion people. I've now done work which has been versioned into 400 plus language versions. People are kind of staggered and say, well, how do you stop HIV/AIDS on a global basis using 3 funny animated condoms? Well, that's it. It's precisely because there are 3 funny animated condoms that it worked. Yeah. If I didn't apply that kind of creative thinking, they wouldn't have worked. If I'd shown real condoms, people would have objected and it would have been taken off the air in many countries. Yet it was seen even in very conservative countries like Iran on national television. So I apply creative thinking in my everyday work all the time, both in my professional life and in my personal life. And I think all of us have to do that. All of us have had to do that in 2020. And I think that's one of the good things we can take out of this year. People often say this is a terrible year. There's a lot of hardship. I'm not so sure. I think, yes, there are aspects of the year that have been unfortunate and very bad, and people have been affected negatively. I have no doubt that a lot of people have gone broke or have lost their savings or have lost their jobs and so on. But the big but is that I think the new thinking that comes out of this year will make the world a better place.
Yeah.
I think that after this year, when we go forward, we will be stronger, we will be better, we will be richer as a global economy, we will be more dynamic, we'll be able to adapt to challenges more easily, and more than anything, we'll be able to apply our creative thinking, because that's what is going to be necessary. Yeah. So I do think that I'm an optimistic person. I deal with some of the world's toughest issues. I mean, I dealt a lot with rape and sexual violence. I deal with diseases that kill a lot of people and things like that. And people often say to me, how do you remain optimistic when you deal with these kinds of issues? Well, it's very simple. I think, generally speaking, that the world is going in the right direction, that we are becoming more creative, that, if you take the issues that I deal with, for example, I've dealt with malaria for many years. Well, the number of malaria cases has gone down dramatically. I've dealt with polio for many years. We've almost eradicated polio. It's only prevalent now in 2 countries, in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And I think in the next couple of years, we'll be done with polio. It'll never come back to the world. And so on and so on. Human rights is much more understood. In modern communications, has made the world a smaller place. Even in something like human rights, if somebody's killed in some obscure village in one country, or a police impacts, a police does something in some country which is not appropriate, somebody pulls out their cell phone and the whole world knows about it instantly, and they can react to it. So I think that the world has changed a lot, and will keep changing, will keep accelerating. Creative thinking doesn't mean that we can forecast the future. We can only deal with what is present and what we can do at the present time. But creative thinking has changed our world and will continue to change the world rapidly.
Yes. So moving on to the last couple of questions then. Firstly, what about for yourself, those days where things go horribly wrong? How do you deal with those?
Oh, I don't have days that go horribly wrong.
I knew you'd say that.
No, in fact, how do I deal with that? It's because I'm a creative person. We all have different ways of dealing with stress. Some people take long showers. Some people go into the bathtub. Some people drink too much. Whatever. I certainly don't drink too much. But there are ways of coping. But I think the best way of coping is simply to daydream, which is one of the best ways to cope with stress and to implement your creative thinking. Daydream, that take yourself out of what you're presently experiencing and what the stimuli is in front of you, physically what you're seeing and what you're hearing. Take yourself out of it and let your mind wander to some other place. And daydreaming is a highly creative thought process. It is essential to your creative thinking, to expanding your creative mind, because daydreaming means that you are being creative because you're not physically in wherever the place is that you're daydreaming about. Yeah. So I think that's a good mechanism that I use quite often to stress. I simply, to deal with stress, I simply stand out to the window, stare out of my window, and I daydream. Therefore, I have a great emphasis, for example, on my views in my offices. I want a very good view because I quite often stand there and just, daydream.
Yeah.
I do think that we have different mechanisms, and all of us will deal with that. But I don't actually have many horrible days, literally, because I have faith in myself, and I think that one of the things that I say in my book about what you need to be a highly creative thinker is ultimately you need passion. You need passion. You need belief in yourself. You need passion for what you do. If you are a passionate person and you believe in what your work is, and you believe in yourself, and you believe in your personal and professional life as it is now, you will not have terrible days.
Thank you. Really like that answer. And then the last question, on those days where you get to live more, and that's where I talk about getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do. What do those days look like for you?
Well, what I would like to do is put every doctor out of business because there's no more diseases. What I would like to do is stop all human rights abuses around the world. What I would like to do is have better governance in the world, much more cooperation in the world, and so on and so on. So, yeah, we all have our dreams that we want, and we work towards those dreams. It doesn't matter whether you're working, to change the world in a kind of global basis, like I am, or you deal just in this very small environment with your family, and you're trying to bring up your children the best way you can, and that's really your dream. You define your own success. There is no universal definition of success. Some people say, well, if they look at a billionaire and they think, oh my gosh, that's a successful man. I'm not so sure that's true. I certainly don't want to be a billionaire ever. If I had $1 billion, I'd probably give it away. I don't think I want to ever be super rich. Some people ascribe to that. That's fine. If that's what your dream is, that's what your definition of success is, it's fine. But there are many other people who have different definitions of successes, including me. Yeah. And I think that if you define your own definition, come up with your own definition of success, and then work towards it, and apply your creative thinking to actually design your own life. Don't just live it. Don't go with the flow. Don't let others decide it. Just decide, use your creative thinking as much as you can to actually design your own life, to create your own life, to create the best possible life that you can have in this short time that we all have on this planet. And then that is absolutely the best way to use your creative thinking.
Lovely. And we're back to that whole individual thing again, aren't we? Lovely.
Yeah. Well, you and I agree on that completely. That actually has very profound implications, because if you think through this notion that that we are, I'm a Canadian, I speak English, and so on. It really doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter. It's who I am. It's Firdaus Kharas, the one person. That's the important part, and I think if everybody thinks that way, it changes your perspective completely in terms of how you see the world and how you interact with people and how you treat other people.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Firdaus. It's been so lovely speaking to you today. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in touch.
Well, they can contact me through my website, which is Chocolate Mousse Media, but it's Mousse the animal, not Mousse the dessert. That's the Canadian part, the mousse. And you can order my book on Amazon or any of the major platforms. You can also go to my website and order it. And if you do order it from my website, it's the same cost. You get a personalized signed copy from me. And you get it much faster than Amazon prints theirs.
And what's it called? What's the actual title?
The title is Creativity, the Key to a Remarkable Life.
Lovely. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me on your show.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com / in this case 194, then you'll find them there. And this week I'd like to talk to you about purpose. It's February, as you know, and we are into the month of simplify in terms of my 5 fundamentals. The second fundamental is simplify, and the topic for this week is purpose. So at the Calm membership Gold Call on Monday, we talked about the link between passion and purpose and reflected on how sometimes we end up doing things because we're getting paid for it, when we'd really prefer to be doing something else, but it's sort of a needs must, at least when we're first starting in our business, to just take the work that we're given rather than getting really clear about what we want to do, what our passion is and what our purpose is. I talked about how there's sort of different ways of expressing our own purpose and about how some people are very vocal and talk very much about the fact that they're going to serve 1 million women in the world or whatever it might be, and that's not how I talk about my purpose, albeit I do have a really clear view myself of what that is. And I think, we all have a purpose. We're all here for a purpose, and some of us understand our own purpose better than others. I think it's something around self-awareness and really sort of getting clear on what that looks like, but it doesn't have to be so sort of loud and vocal that you're sort of nailing it to your mast, if you like, and really working to that in a very sort of loud way. You can have your purpose and be working towards that purpose and not express it so publicly, but actually use it as your North Star, as your sort of vision of where you want to go, connected to what you want to do to help people or what you want to do in your life, but it doesn't necessarily have to be so public. We also spent some time talking about strengths and how important it is to know our strengths and how that then feeds into and supports our purpose. And I talked about the Gallup Clifton Strengths Finder, which I did many years ago and didn't really do very much with until about 5 years ago, and then actually read it again and realised how much it can help me and has helped me to work out what my purpose is and therefore what my vision is for my business. Penny also suggested afterwards a free resource, which is via character.org, where you can go and find out more about your strengths on that website. We talked about how important it is to marry our purpose and our passion with what we offer in our business, and to really bear in mind those things when we're devising programs and thinking about products that we want to sell to our customers and clients. And I was saying that I was listening to a podcast myself that day, which talked about a way of coaching that actually really appealed to me and really fitted with how I want to work. And I hadn't really thought about the sort of angle that person was sharing until that moment, and then it really fed into my thoughts about future plans for my own business. So that thing about keeping learning and keeping aware of what other people are doing, and listening to other suggestions and other thoughts, and then thinking about how you can bring some of that learning, some of those examples from other people into what you're offering, so that you are living your purpose and you are doing the things that you really want to do. And we finished by just talking about the fact that there is a course in the Calm membership called How to Get Started Simplifying Your Life, and there's a whole section in there devoted to discovering your purpose and passion, which is such an important part of getting really clear on what you want to do and then aligning your activity with that, which is what I say the Simplify fundamental is. So for the first topic of the month, think about your purpose. Do you know what it is? And if you don't, what can you do to get really clear on what it is? And then how can you make sure that that fits with what you want to do, what you don't want to do, and your activity, to make sure that you really are running your business and living your life on purpose. And just to give you a heads up on next week, we'll be talking about goal setting. And if my Power to Live More Calm Gold membership is sounding intriguing and you want to find out a bit more and sign up so that you can attend our weekly sessions, which are on Mondays at 2:00 GMT, then you can go to powertolivemore.com/getcalm. And if you use the discount code my1trial, and that's with the letter 1, So you can get access to the membership site for just £1 for the first month, and then after that it's £37 a month to give you access to all the courses and the materials and the sessions that we have each week and the accountability in there as well. So that's powertolivemore.com/get calm and the discount code my1trial with the number 1. Again, the show notes are at powertolivemore.com/194, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.